Hey, everybody. In this week's episode, we're going to be talking about how you really take back your power and create the reality you want. And we're going to learn how to hack into the present moment. So that's coming up next.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to another episode of the Wizard Factory Video Podcast, where you subscribe for weekly videos exploring deeper understanding of the universe and ourselves. My name is Logan Hart.
And I'm Brian Easterday.
If you are new to the channel, first of all, welcome. We're so happy you came by. We hope you enjoy the content. And if so, please remember to subscribe and you'll see our videos every week and get notifications on that as well. We have our podcast now featured on all the popular audio platforms, Spotify, iTunes, etc. Click that link below if you'd like to follow us there and listen to us at some times that it may not be realistic to watch the video version. And finally, make sure you follow us on social media, especially Facebook. We're starting to do a lot more free, high quality, valuable content there and really try to cultivate more of a tribe and more of an online community there. So definitely, if you want to be a part of that, go find us there and follow us. Let's get into the content today. We're talking about a very simple concept, the present moment, which, much like the present moment, is very simple in its presentation, but its wisdom, its lessons, its generosity is as deep as the ocean if we can learn to truly tap into that. So we're going to talk a bit about the benefits of it and more on how you can actually tap into that. So, Brian, would you like to kind of open this one up?
Sure. We're calling this one like give focus and wonder, but like Logan said, it's really all about coming into the present moment and becoming aware of that. The little subtitle is a lesson from the goddess. This is a lesson I've come across a few different times in my life, presented in slightly different like phrases, but they're all the same lesson. But it's always come from a strong feminine figure. And like women in my life that like I have a lot of respect for, as well as like just working with like Venus and archetypes like Freya. The same kind of lesson always keeps coming up as one of the biggest lessons I think it has to offer. And it's all to do with coming into the present moment and just like seeing life and just how beautiful it really is and enjoying that and not being stuck in like the past or the future. So we're going to like break this down, like, with a few different little phrases and kind of really get into what it's all about. But definitely some interesting topics that we'll hit on in here for sure.
Absolutely. So we wanted to kind of paint the picture with some symbolism as well, and drawing upon the Norse traditions for this symbolism and how they can kind of portray these concepts that we're talking about. The first one being the Helm of Awe. That's actually the symbol that Brian normally has on his tapestry behind him. It's like a helm or a compass with 9 domains or worlds. Brian, would you like to explain how this relates to the present moment?
Yeah, I mean, for me, even just the name, the Aish Helmer, like you said, it translates to the Helm of Awe. But to me, when you think about that, like the Helm of Awe, it's that, to me, it's like speaking to that kind of energy of Odin or Woden that we talk about, that ecstasy or that fury of self-awareness where you're in the present moment in a state of like awe and a state of wonder, just from the pure passion of learning more, of like going after that knowledge and that wisdom and just in serving your purpose, like walking your orlog. That there's something to be said of that. And if we've talked about the Helm of Awe on the show before, like especially in episodes like the unconscious feedback loop and things like that. If you haven't seen those, go check those out. We really break down all the 9 worlds. But when you understand, if you imagine they're like the helm of it, like it would be like you're in the center, like you're in Midgard, in the center of all the worlds, like or you're like at the helm of a ship, and just like, but like that ship is just, you're riding through life, and there's just this absolute beauty and wonder to it. So I think it's very interesting to note like that it's called that for a reason. Like, it's always kind of hit me as something of like, yeah, it's about taking that kind of, like taking life by the horns, like, so to say. Or if you even imagine like, the Viking merchant and traders that were out and about, like they were literally getting on these boats, like going out like into the ocean and exploring the world. Like it's that feeling of just like living life fearlessly, like a warrior, and just being in awe of the wonder of it. Like it's something very important in that, and being able to like tap into that, and that keeps life exciting and new.
Yes, and this is 100% connected to your own personal empowerment, because the now is really what matters ultimately, because it's the only thing that's real now. So it's very useful to think ahead, to plan, to strategize, unfold long-term plans and things. It's useful to reflect on the past and extrapolate the lessons that you may not have missed, or what ways that you could have done things better. But the now is where we apply the plan and the experience from the past into your empowered state of being at any given moment. Decisions, choices, navigation. When you're using that helm to steer your ship, you're doing that in the now, and that's where your point of power that you're creating is accessed. So in the same way, the Helm of Awe, another representation of that is Sleipnir, the eight-legged horse of Odin, and in that same way, it is the vehicle that can carry you, but you're the one guiding it, if that makes sense. So it's that kind of interplay mutually that is allowing you to navigate and create through your place of empowerment in the now. Again, hence the word awe. It's like saying whoa. Well, whoa comes from Woden. It's the same expression. It's the same feeling of whoa. It's describing what happens, or the sensation that you feel when your consciousness is being expanded by an experience in a way that is able to be received by you. Too much knowledge, too much experience for an undeveloped soul is going to rip you to shreds. You can't handle it. You're not ready for that. The woe, the awe, is when you're being expanded in a very healthy way, right? It's like when you're stretching, you stretch just enough to push your boundaries, and that's serving you, versus just going for touching your toes and then you like tear a ligament or something like that. So it's just it's another way of looking at that moment, that feeling, that whoa or that awe, and what's actually occurring when that happens.
Right. Yeah, and I like that you brought up Sleipnir, because if we look at like his name, it means slipper. So it's Odin's, in the mythology, it's Odin's eight-legged horse that he rides, that allows him to travel to all the through all the nine worlds, because he can slip through the nine worlds, right? He can move between them. So you can look at metaphorically the Helm of Awe like as another representation of that, with Midgard being like where you would be riding. It's Middle Earth. It's just like that's the now where you're riding from.
The central
but
point.
It's through that you slip through the other worlds. You connect with the other worlds. They're different aspects of ourselves, and that's part of like coming into the now, is being able to connect with all those aspects of ourselves. But like through Midgard being the central point, or Sleipnir. Another thing that we can see is that the now is the place where both we create the past and the future. It's like in every moment you're creating something that's instantly becoming the past, which is then setting up circumstances which will play out in the future through karmas, right? And this is demonstrated very well in the concept of the web of weird, which we've covered on the show before in an episode called Unwrapping the Present, which is some similar concept to this, but we wanted to really revisit it. because it is such a valuable lesson. And for those of you not familiar with the web of weird, this is a concept from the Norse mythology that there are three giantesses which are weaving, our reality field. They're putting everything that ever happens into this tapestry, so to speak, known as the web of weird. And the giantesses' names are Urd, which is that which has been. You could look at it as the past. Verdandi, which is the ever becoming present moment. Think about that, the ever becoming present moment. And then Skuld, which means that which should, and how the understanding works is in Verdandi, the ever becoming present moment, you're making choices which are instantaneously becoming Urd, the past, which are then going to reflect a Skuld, something you should experience because of that. But you're always going to experience it in Verdandi. So it's like there's only the now, but there's also the past and the future. And it's this is a very interesting concept. But when you think about that and you really dive into it, it's a very interesting thing to understand. And it demonstrates that point that the now is where we're creating both the past and the future. So, so many people, when they're stuck in a toxic cycle, they're thinking about what happened to them in the past, or they're stuck in a state of worry and anxiety because they're always anxious about the future. But meanwhile, they're actually like creating, more of what they, like if you keep thinking and replaying the same events of the past over and over again and dwelling on them, well, what are you doing in the now? You're reinforcing that past, you're reinforcing that story, which you're going to then continue to experience in the future. So if you want to like change that, like stop doing that and then start rewriting your story the way you want it to be, and then you'll slowly start creating a past which reflects that and a future which you'll continue to experience more and more of that in. But that the access point is through the now.
Right. And I love that you mentioned already the past and the future in that context of when you're perpetuating an experience of trauma. So I actually recently started watching a new show by Dr. Joe Dispenza, which is now featured on Gaia, called Rewired. And it's a really amazing display of all the research that has come about through all these different sciences, like quantum physics, obviously, neuroscience, epigenetics, all of these things that are kind of weaving a tapestry of knowledge that he's presented. And he's really each episode is going through kind of different aspects that are at play. But a really big dynamic that's occurring is that when you're stuck in this sort of loop of a traumatic experience, whether it was a long-term childhood upbringing or just one really horrific thing that happened to you, or some combination of the two, essentially the way that your brain, your neural network is actually firing together again and again, because that which is wired together will fire together. It's a certain neural pathway through the connections in your brain, essentially, that are keeping you stuck in what he calls the familiar past and the predictable future. So the familiar past is, the perpetual cycle of pain and suffering and chaos that you feel you're stuck in, but it's because it's become familiar to you. Your brain is then dependent on those chemicals, such as, the stress chemicals like cortisol and things like that. And then you might even be subconsciously continuing to create more chaos and instability in your life because you're trying to get your chemical fix in your brain. And then the predictable future means that because the past isn't changing, it's continuing to be the same thing, then you're projecting that into your future. And then you kind of get stuck between those two places, and it keeps you from being allowed to have new experiences. And that's really the key. When you're able to have new experiences, that's the thing that actually turns this cycle and shifts it back into a positive upward spiral instead. And we can get more into the how and why of that, but I definitely want to share some bits about that entire series, because it's a lot of really interesting information that deals with the now, and then like the science behind what's occurring inside the mind when these things that are happening, from stress to depression. These are very, very common problems, and it's just really useful to really get in there and get that kind of mechanical understanding of what's occurring.
Yeah, you were talking about that series the other day when we were chatting, and I definitely need to check that out because it sounds very interesting, very similar to like the work that Bruce Lipton done, which, you know, him and Dr. Joe Dispenza have done a lot of work together in the
Yes.
field of epigenetics, and Bruce Lipton's biology belief really hits on those same things. But I love this is a wonderful place to observe where modern science is finally catching up to what the ancient sages and, you know, mystery traditions and all these traditions understood. You know, we're just figuring out, you know, the physiology of like why that is chemically happening in the brain, but we're learning the exact same lesson as what we can observe from the web of weird, you know, or from,
Right.
There's so many other traditions that have the Vedas have the same kind of understanding of this as well. Even in astrology, like this is how we create our reality is what we're getting at here. And if you really want to start creating the life you want, you have to learn how to master the present moment. Like the life you want, like it doesn't happen like in the future. Like you have to start like taking the steps like every single day, like towards it. And it doesn't mean you have to get there exactly. You know what I mean? Like in an instant, but you understand it's like, it goes back to that quote that it's my favorite quote, by Lao Tzu. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. You know, it's that very kind of Saturnian understanding of like, you just keep going. Like, but you're stepping into the now, and you're choosing to continue to like take those actions to create the reality that you want. It's a very powerful lesson. Like when you really start to practice it, and you see how much time and how much of your life you actually get back, and you can start to like look back and kind of see that like, oh, I've spent a lot of my years just stuck in the past worrying about things or worrying about the future. Like how much time did I actually miss out on that my life just flew past me,
Or just worrying about the future and is like preventative, like, oh, I hope this doesn't happen, I hope that doesn't happen, while
Yeah.
simultaneously in the present moment continuing to create the very thing that you mentally are resisting.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That's a valid point too, as well. Another good way to look at being able to step into the now is when it comes into in the context of emotions. We've talked about on the show that, emotions are energy in motion, and that it really is all about like feeling them in that present moment and like letting them flow. Just like, water that's healthy, it's going to be flowing. Our emotions need to be the same way. You feel it and you process it and allow it to go. But whenever you're choosing to, I'm going to push this down, or I'm not going to deal with it, or whatever it is, that's where that stagnation can get in. But what happens, like, then you have all these things that you didn't deal with, they're not resolved, and then you stay stuck in the past. Like there's so many people that they'll feel like they got slighted by a certain person, and it could have been something that happened, decades ago, but yet they'll, every new person they meet, they'll just tell them this life story of how they're the victim and how, this happened to them and all of this, and they'll just be holding on to that, and they're stuck in the past because they never actually process those emotions. And by doing that, they're robbing themselves of that, the present that is the present moment. Like it's a gift you're robbing yourself of if you're choosing to stay stuck.
Exactly.
Like it's okay to observe the past, but don't stay stuck there.
Right. And what Dr. Joe Dispenza is sharing in this film as well is it's a matter of a two-step process to generate this sort of like higher state of bliss and super connectedness into the present moment. And it's essentially where you're holding a a strong positive intention in your mind. So that's the intellectual aspect. And then you're feeling an elevated feeling in your heart. And it's called mind-heart coherence or cohesion. That's what's generating, much like a battery. You have the positive and negative charge. You have to activate both power centers, your electromagnetic biological system. It's the head and the heart.
Mm-hmm.
So, this may sound really familiar. It's actually very similar to The Secret, but to me, it's not that really The Secret is false or it's baloney. It's just that it needs to be taught correctly, and that's really the key. There is that, to me, The Secret and this very concept are simply a matter of taking care of your internal world. The internal aspect has to be there. The external aspect also has to be there, which means taking action, making different choices, which is then therefore creating a different reality, a different experience, which will then perpetuate further that heightened emotion, the more realistic intention, because it's ever more materializing and seeming like within your grasp, and that's going to perpetuate those elevated emotions, and then you're kind of like, it's like an engine that's fueling itself through that. But that's how the process gets started.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's you can see the same lesson just in so many different traditions, even in the Vedic tradition, like in the understanding of astrology. How we view it is, you were coming into incarnation because like the planets, the grahas, the graha means to grab, they're calling you in order so you can learn about certain karmas, have certain experiences. And karmas, they always come to you through the mind, but so they're like an accumulation of your past experiences. And then when certain things, certain karmas ripen, they come to you, and they come to you in that present moment. So you have free will to choose like whatever, well, within that realm of that situation. But there's like a certain situation that you're set up with that you're going to have to learn lessons about and things, and then you can choose. So there's like the influence. There's always the influence of your past actions and the things that you've done that are kind of creating that. But you can always still choose. You always have the choice to figure out how you want to direct that. Like whether you want to continue that same pattern and that same cycle, or you want to shift that, and that's why shifting can be difficult, is because it's like a snowball effect where you're carrying all this energetic or this karmic momentum from the past and all your previous choices. And then all of a sudden you're trying to stop that momentum and start something completely different. It can be done, but it's like a difficult process sometimes. So, you can just see the same lesson over and over again, that it really comes down to like the now and what you're choosing, like with your free will, the actions that you're taking. And that's what's going to create the life, that ultimately you live. When you look back into your life, it's just going to be an accumulation of all these choices that you made in the now that, created, the past that will have been the story of your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. Another way you could look at this is even, we've heard the phrase victim of your circumstances. If you're familiar with this channel, you know that we're not big fans of the victim mentality. We talk about it a lot and how it's not an empowered mindset, but it's kind of one of those paradoxical truths that you can be a victim of your circumstances, but always at that time, any given time, you're a victim of your circumstances, but your circumstances are also a victim of your choices as well. It's called a feedback loop. So you might be really tied down by lots of things happening in your life, but what it takes is a small shift in your choices that begin to shift your circumstances away from the current ones. And that doesn't just happen overnight. So in that way, when you say I'm a victim of my circumstances, it's true, because they are what they are right then in that moment. If you're in a jail cell or something like that just is what it is. But remember that circumstances are very malleable. So just because they're very concrete now, they're malleable on a long enough timeline, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a useful way to look at it.
I like that you brought the term feedback loop, because it brought up something that you mentioned earlier when you were talking about Dr. Joe Dispenza. and how people, they get stuck in these trauma cycles that it becomes like a feedback loop. But it really goes back to those episodes that we did that we called the unconscious feedback loop, where we looked at the Helm of Awe and how, what each of these worlds are psychologically on a level for us. And then, we looked at how, like, where it comes from an unconscious place, this opens up like this feedback loop of trauma that people get stuck in, that they then develop very dogmatic behavior, or they get stuck in trauma cycles or develop cult-like behavior, these kind of things. So, in context of this episode, that would be those would be excellent episodes to go back and check out. And let us know in the comments below, like, what you're thinking of this, like, so far. Have you had experiences where you spent a lot of time dwelling in the past or in the future, and you kind of realized that you maybe robbed yourself of the present moment? And, just let us know your thoughts below.
Absolutely. And another quick point I forgot to make earlier, in case you didn't know, we now have a Laying the Foundations playlist. So go to our channel and scroll down and find that playlist. If you're new to the channel, obviously we have a lot of content that can feel really overwhelming. So if you want a good place to start to really get those fundamental foundations laid down that everything else is built upon, highly recommend that. And so far we're getting a lot of good feedback on that. So moving on, the next couple of points are yours.
Yeah, I can hit them.
But actually, while I have the flow broken up, I'd like to throw in those calls to action I forgot earlier too, and I'll just move those to the beginning when I'm editing it. That cool?
Sure, yeah, do your thing, and then whenever I take the points. Yeah, do your thing, bro.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm just going to do the whole spiel again. Like, you'll see. Just, yeah.
So the next little thing, could kind of tie into what we were talking about with emotions, and you're wanting to acknowledge them, but not dwell on them and stay stuck in the past. A very useful practice that you can use is whenever you're feeling something, or especially like if you're feeling triggered by something, right? You feel like you got angry real quick, or something just upset you in some way, rubbed you the wrong way. Stop yourself and then ask, like, well, why does that make me feel this way? Like, you kind of start that questioning process where instead of just getting caught by it, you kind of pull yourself back to it, and like, it's like you're surgically splitting it open, I guess, would be a way to look at it, that you're just really diving into, okay, so why is this feeling here? And like, try to trace it to the root of that. And a lot of, or sometimes I'll do, a way I can do this is if I'll notice myself feeling frustrated all of a sudden, I'll go back and look at what my thought process was. Like, okay, well, what was the thought that first kind of sent me off on the path that led to the other thoughts that really got me upset? Like, where was the connection point? Just becoming aware, like in the moment that, you're feeling this way, and then taking the time to like observe it, find the roots of it. That's a very useful practice that can help you start to work with those trauma points and triggers that came from like your past experience. So you can work with them instead of just getting triggered by them and then continuing that same kind of unconscious feedback loop and cycle that we've been talking about here.
Right. And if that's happened to you, share your experience down below. I'm sure this is a very relatable scenario where something happened and it seemed like very kind of a small thing, but for some reason it just really kind of got you upset and feeling, and you're not sure where this has come from. As a Cancer in the Western charts, I have those crabby tendencies. And so for me, when something kind of pricks me the wrong way and I'm like, I get all in my feels, I have to kind of go in my hidey hole and sort of process that, or else I might end up kind of acting out of emotion when I wouldn't, otherwise want to do that, or acting in a bad way, where just first of all, remove yourself from the situation if that's possible. It's not always possible, but if you can, just get away, even if you just have to go in the bathroom and close the door and pretend you're taking a shit for a minute, just to kind of like recollect and get your bearings, and like Ryan said, sort of contemplate, like, what was it about that in particular that really bothered me so much, and try to find that deeper root cause, because there's almost always something deeper going on, especially when it's a reaction like that. and just kind of be your own psychoanalyst and kind of try to find the root of that, and then determine ultimately, is it fixable? Then what can I do to fix it? If it's not fixable, what can I do to either accept it or just, wait it out till the situation changes or whatever have you. It's all about what's practical, what's useful. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
In terms of time and emotional energy spent on things.
Right. No, it all comes down again, that awareness creates choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you become aware of like what's going on, like how are you spending your energy? And then you have the choice of like how you want to shift that. And do I actually want to continue this cycle or do I want to shift it? It's all about awareness. So that leads really well into, some lessons of like why we kind of like chose to, kind of call this episode Lessons from the Goddess, because this is something, as I mentioned earlier, these were lessons that I learned not only working with like Venus and Freya, but just with other, encountering other, very empowered feminine figures, in my life. Even the title of like Give Focus and Wonder, came from like my wonderful, lady that, we were having a conversation and she just like said that phrase and it just kind of hit me as something like really powerful. And I was like, oh, that would make a good episode. Like, so then it got on the list. But another one came from a good friend of mine, him and his wife, and they have a little off-grid property up in the redwoods. They can build like a straw bale house that I've helped them with and everything. And you go up this mountain drive, and the driveway kind of goes up, and it turns. And right at the corner there, right before you turn to see the house, because there's kind of like a hill over here with trees, so you can't see where the property is on the driveway. It's just the driveway. But right when you turn the corner, there's this very strategically placed sign that just says, "Be here now." And every time I go visit them, it's something that always stuck out to me. And one day, I was out, I was working on the house with my friend, and I brought that sign up to him. I was like, I really like that sign. He's like, yeah, that was probably one of the biggest lessons I learned from Dandelion, which is his wife. He's like, I've always been so stuck on just like working that I would get stuck in the future and just always worrying about what would go there. And like one of the things she just kind of sat me down and told me once was to just be here now. Like, it's okay to enjoy life. It's okay to see the beautiful things. You don't always have to just be constantly working and just stuck, with your mind in the future. So the reason like they placed that sign there was so, every time, he comes home or whatever, right before you turn that drive and you see the home, you're supposed to be, the thought is that you're leaving all of that behind and you're making sure you're stepping into the present moment. Like when you're coming home, you're enjoying life when you're getting there. So I think it's such a wonderful expression of this lesson. And they're wonderful people that I have a lot of respect and love for. They have so many other lessons to share, but that was one that always really stuck out to me. And it's, it really reflects that, the same thing I've been learning working with like Freya and this kind of Venus energy is just that devotion to life, to just enjoying things and the beauty of it and just the experience. It's not, that spirituality isn't happening, in the 10th dimension or anything. It's right here. Like it's in Midgard. This is where it happens. And it's a beautiful place, but you're never going to be able to fully enjoy that and get the most out of it if you're always stuck in the past or the future. You have to come into that present moment to get the gift.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one of the reasons that it tends to be a more of a kind of a masculine problem when it comes to like looking at the future and when especially in terms of like working on your career and getting work done and moving towards your goals is because particularly the masculine brain likes quantifiable results. It's a lot easier to say, oh, I did this amount of work and then I made this amount of sales, or I did this amount of work and I got this paycheck. It's measurable, whereas it's a lot harder to quantify the value of a walk in the park or, a day swimming with the family in the lake or something like that. It's one of those things that it's almost like it's beyond measure because it's like looking at, like the depth of the ocean or something like that. Like you can say, oh, this is this body of water is this amount of gallons. But even that, it's not like your brain actually understands that, because it's such a vast and deep amount that you can't even quite wrap your logical mind around it, just as a rule.
Yeah,
but it's like
point.
It's those bigger implications too, because it's like, what are you going to be thinking about on your deathbed? You should have worked more hours that 1 week so you could have got a couple extra dollars that week. Or are you going to be thinking about your whole life and how you didn't spend enough time with your family or in nature, or just having fun and doing things that you love that aren't necessarily getting you paid or working you towards your goals, other than you should have the goal of feel good, enjoy life, take a load off once in a while, let your hair down.
Yeah. No, that's beautiful, dude. I love that. That's an excellent point of like, as to why, like, it's more of kind of like a feminine lesson or expression. Yeah. Cause this is something I've just, in so many different forms, like the feminine, I've learned this lesson like over and over again, that it kind of just gets reflected back to me. It's a very wonderful thing.
Actually,
and then, the be here now, would you like to break that down a little bit? Because when we were talking earlier, you had done like kind of a really, I like the way you had broke it down. So would you mind doing that again for us?
Absolutely. I was just about to add that in. I first heard about this. It's cool how we kind of had our own little exposure stories of how we discovered this. For me, back when I was like early 20s, I spent a summer in New Mexico with a buddy and his brother, and like his brother was like really, like, he was into Burning Man and Rainbow and all that kind of stuff that I was not exposed to very much at that time either. And he shared a book with me by Ram Dass called Be Here Now. And that's kind of like the centralized lesson or teaching of his life work. Those of you familiar with Ram Dass, I think he has some really, really profound work, to be looked at. But it's like the ultimate statement of existence, in my opinion. This is my own kind of like personal analysis of it, because think about it. What does it mean to even exist? Well, you're to be, right? Well, there's the be. And then beyond existence, like if you just exist, then you're kind of just floating in the universe without anything to do, anywhere to go, right? You have to add the space-time aspect, which is here. What physical location am I? I'm being here now. Now I have like a spatial orientation, and then the linear time kind of aspect of now, because it's ironic. This is getting a little bit deep, but bear with me. If you're thinking about even on like a what's the word, geometric level of the universe, to be, you're occupying a certain space time, and if you want to turn any direction, you're looking at the X, Y, and Z axis, which kind of form like a bubble. That's the feminine. It's like you're in an egg or a womb. It's enveloping you. It's all around you, like that spatial. That's why material is matter, is mother, maternal. And then time is the masculine. It's linear. It's like a straight line. You're moving through time. On the higher level, time isn't actually linear, but we do experience time in a linear way, where it's like we're on the train tracks of time, and the now is just the actual train that we're on, where we're at on the track. But
it's very interesting that same Be Here Now, even in like the Vedic tradition, like on certain holidays when you're calling down a certain deity to work with, one of the ways when you go about doing that, you're supposed to let the deity know like where you are, essentially, like your location and like your time. But the time is not like the time is how we would read it, 24 hours. It's time based off of astrological timing and cycles and things like that. So, but it's still like it's that same concept of, even if you're wanting to call a certain energy in, like a deity to work with, you have to let them know where in space time you are. So then they, so it's the same kind of concept. It's very interesting, but it's that B is that microcosm, and it's like that subject, and then that space time is is the object. It's very interesting way to break that down. And I love little phrases and it's like a bunch of scrolls flying over here. I love little phrases and stuff that, it's very simple, it has that complicated simplicity in it. Like you can take this phrase, but yeah, it explains like all of creation in it. Like those are
with
beautiful
3 words
to listen to take. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing to be able to like summarize things like that. Another thing to be aware of is like, to be mindful of escapism, which is, like the opposite of being present. Like when people are stuck in like addiction or whatever it is, they're always trying to like escape, either like their past or their present, like and then they just end up stuck in those same cycles because they're not actually taking their power back in the now. So if you're always like looking for a different time or place or experience, that's a way you can catch yourself doing that. And it's like, okay, so, and that doesn't mean like you don't dream about goals that you have or things like that. But if you're stuck there, if you're only ever worrying about this or thinking about the past and you don't take the time to just like enjoy your life in that now, like that, you'll really miss out on a lot.
Yeah, and you can actually see how even the elements of escapism can kind of have like this masculine and feminine expression or manifestation to them. Being stuck in the past is more of a feminine sort of energy, I guess you could say. I'm not saying that females are necessarily more prone to it. I'm describing the nature of this energy of like being stuck in the past. Like the empty nest syndrome, the postpartum depression. Think of earth and water are the feminine elements. Well, those are the receptive. The vessel, the earth. You plant seeds. You water holds intentions and things like that. Without balance, it can become a very stagnant, stuck thing if you're not incorporating flow into that energy of like the stick in the mud kind of thing, or just like a stagnant lake full of muck. Whereas the masculine, on the other hand, again, it's like the future mindset, problem solving, anticipating danger and scarcity. Those are like survival masculine kind of modes. Schedule and time, very oriented, like always about being on time, having a schedule, sticking to it, all of that. And then again, fire and air being the other 2 elements representing the masculine, still a stagnant energy, but just in a different way where, fire and air represent sort of action and thought. So you're stuck in that mode rather than just like focusing on the past. If that makes sense, you're more fixated on the future.
Yeah, if you're like, the air is the intellect and our communication and things, and then fire is our action. So what happens when you add air to a fire? That fire is going to get bigger. So, if you're just always thinking about the future, you're just taking more and more actions to the point that like it in a way that you can just forget to stop and be present in the moment. But, I like that you brought that up because it's something I see like when I do relationship consults. There's a lot of times the feminine, they'll be thinking about kind of the past, and things like that, or whoever has more feminine energy in their chart, they'll be the one that they tend to get stuck on things that happened in the past. Oh, you did this 4 years ago, or whatever it is. Right. And then like, and a lot of times, the female will be like upset that maybe they feel like the man's not being present with them. And then they're thinking about different things of like, oh, on this day, he didn't necessarily like compliment me when I had, or whatever it may be, like just as a scenario. But with like the men, you see like what it is like, they're like, well, no, I'm just working hard all the time because I want us to be like set up. I want us like, it's, I'm taking all these actions, and it's like, there's like a misinterpretation, and it just comes down to like not understanding the difference between masculine and feminine, and the difference between like the elements of water and earth and then fire and air. They just work different ways, and the key is to not get stuck in either or, and to be able to like use them all in harmony. So, for men, it's really important for us to incorporate more of that earth and that water and start to learn to like feel more in the present and like just enjoy that. And that earth element of just kind of learning to stay still and sit a little bit. Like, you know,
Right.
for a lot of females, they'll have to kind of learn to, you know, start incorporating more of the action and more of like that air element and things like that as a way of
Right.
getting out of that place of stagnation if they're feeling stuck in the past. So if you don't like the past or what the situation that's been going on, how do you get out of that? We have to think about how you're going to do that, and then you have to take action on it. You have to use air and fire. So,
Right.
you know, it's very interesting to see how that stagnation can play out through the masculine and feminine energies.
Exactly. And as a kind of a final closing point, we wanted to at least touch on some of the kind of solutions, or what can you do to cultivate more presence, more connection to the present moment. Definitely, to me, meditation is the first thing that comes to mind. Incidentally,
Mm-hmm.
it's the same exact technique that Joe Dispenza talks about in his show as what he uses with his clients to present these amazing transformations in these studies that he does, specific
Mm-hmm.
techniques using meditation. I also like yoga personally, because for me, yoga is like an activity that includes a lot of different beneficial sub activities, such as, you know, your fitness, your cardiorespiratory health, it's breathing techniques, it's mindfulness, which is kind of in the meditation zone, it's flexibility, it's, you know, strengthening your joints and moving your lymph system, and, you know, it has all these benefits. And that's, to me, where it's at, is finding activities that have the most massive, like, circle of effect, area of effect,
Mm-hmm.
if you will. Brian, what about you? What's some of your favorite methods?
Yeah, well, I definitely like that you mentioned like meditation. Well, and yoga even being a form of meditation, you just means to yoke. You're unifying the mind and the body with the breath, like, you know. So it's all this process of coming into the present moment. But for me, just working within the circle every day, you know, casting my circle and doing my ritual, or doing different breath work, you know, like the whole breath and other things like that. And for those of you who don't know, we have a free initiation package that actually has a toolbox kit where we actually teach how to cast a circle, how to do a meditation exercise called the Hool Breath, and then as well as how to work with the runes, with the rune galder. So if you're not familiar with that, go to our website, thewizardfactory.com. It's right there on the top. Just click it, totally free. You just enter your email and you get sent a link for that. As well as you get access to our Inner Sanctum Facebook group, which, you know, that's the place where if you want personal interaction with us, that's the place to go. We're going to start posting, you know, more live videos and more content on there, like Logan mentioned earlier, as well as if you want to ask us questions, you know, like that's the place we're really going and where we're wanting to like build that tribe. So that gets you access to that as well.
Exactly. I mean, that's essentially why we made that, as a useful tool for people to have, you know, practical habits and things that they can do to bolster their power in a simple kind of day-to-day, easily applicable solutions, essentially. And, you know, but it doesn't always have to be something like meditation, or something that has all this stigma to it about, well, meditation is how you tap into the present moment. Yes, that's true. But for me, it's just as effective for me to pick up my guitar. Especially, I love playing improv, meaning you play music without having a plan, or you're not playing something you learned. You're literally inventing the song as it goes. To me, that's one of my number one personal preferred methods, because it's like a way of expressing my very soul through the guitar. And in those moments, I'm not thinking, but the next note or the next chord is about as far into the future as I'm going. I'm not thinking about my laundry list of to-do stuff, or to, you know, take out the trash or whatever like that. I'm fully present with that activity. In the same way, especially if you're performing and you make a mistake, guess what? it's a practice of not lingering in the past, not allowing that fuck up to then, nosedive my performance because you just let it slip away.
Right.
Like you just let it go. You're like, whatever,
Yeah.
the next note sounds good. And now I've captivated you with that. It doesn't matter.
Right. Yeah, no,
so
that's excellent.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I think that's just a very good example of like being present in the moment is music, like playing music. That's a wonderful
Even listening to
metaphor. Yeah, or even listening to it, because it is that whole. It's like our life is like you're writing your own song, and we're kind of all doing it like on an improv. Like,
right.
So don't get hung up on the mistake. Just keep playing.
Yes,
like,
your creative process in life should reflect the creative process of playing improv guitar, for example, or
right.
find your own little version of that, whether it's I'm going to start painting a picture without any plan on what it's going to be, or that sort of thing. Like, find your own unique way of doing it, but very powerful stuff.
Yeah. And if this is something that there's something that you guys like to do, or certain practice you have, like, let us know in the comments. Like, we want to hear, like, what are useful practices for you. Those you guys commenting in the comments adds even more value to the content. It's where the community can start to connect with each other. And a lot of times, if you go through and read the comments, you'll see people commenting very, very valuable, very insightful things. So, that's the way you guys can contribute and continue to add value to the community here. But we hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to, subscribe, hit that notification bell so you get notified every week when we put out episodes. Keep an eye out, again, on Facebook. We're going to start doing more kind of lives and little Q&As and things like that on there. But until next week, be empowered, be inspired, and be encouraged.